Thank you, Martin, very much indeed, and good morning, everyone, and how appropriate that we should have had a minute's silence for the terrible events of yesterday. For me, it's a great honour and privilege to be invited to make a few opening remarks on this policing domestic violence conference. Congratulations, first of all, to the organisers for arranging so good a programme and getting so many people here. It's great to see so many people here today for what remains one of the most critical issues facing modern society. Events like these, which draw so many experts, specialist experience, both from speakers and audience, in one place, are proof of the powerful resources and commitment that exist to eradicate the violence that women and sometimes men continue to suffer throughout the world. But they also remind us of the enormity of the challenge and demonstrate how much further we obviously have to go. It's genuinely disturbing, isn't it, that despite decades of progress in the pursuit of gender equality, tolerance and respect, we continue to live in a country, in a world in which sexual violence and domestic abuse do remain at shocking levels. And worse than that, is still so often just not reported. Without doubt, though, there has been a sea change, in my view, in society's attitude towards domestic abuse over the last, 30 years, 20 years, and following that, in the police's attitude towards it. My 10 months as a Police and Crime Commissioner has let me see just how high up its priorities, the police's priorities, domestic abuse is. The extraordinary thing is how low in society's priorities domestic abuse used to be. Many of you in the audience and among the speakers will have played a significant role in making it so important an issue. Let me repeat a few facts. I've said them before at lectures, and you will know them better than I do, but they're worth repeating. That 1 in every 5 women in the UK has experienced some form of sexual violence since the age of 16. Secondly, 1 in 3 teenage girls in England have been pressured into doing something sexual by a partner. And thirdly, 1/3 of female students in the UK have experienced inappropriate touching or groping at university. These are bad figures and completely unacceptable. And they are a disgrace, actually, to a country that calls itself civilized. It seems probable, not necessarily my view, but it's argued, that unhealthy attitudes and behavior that are learned in childhood will permeate adulthood, where they are much more difficult to reverse. I say learned because violence is a learned behavior where beliefs and attitudes relate to control, and violence become the norm from a young age. This is why all our work with young people is crucial, and why I think we need to do more in schools and colleges to educate and promote what are described as healthy relationships, not a phrase I like very much, but one that's used, and respect among an impressionable young audience. This is preventative. We're working equally hard to support those people already harmed by violence and abuse with better recovery services, and I pay tribute to UAVA, which is the coalition really of three charities that deal with domestic violence, and in which the 2 local authorities, the County Council and the City Council, and my office help fund in Leicester and Leicestershire and Rutland. The projects take an empowerment approach, helping survivors to cope with their traumatic experiences, plan for their safety and develop self-esteem and confidence, which will help to protect them, hopefully, against future re-victimization. It's why Project 360 is so interesting and important a project. the collaboration between the Leicestershire Police and the local authorities, again partly funded by the OPCC. I deeply regret not being able to stay to hear the sessions on it afterwards, but actually this very morning I'm launching my police and crime plan, which is the police and crime plan for the next 4 years, in the city, another part of the city. And that plan, of course, deals with domestic violence and domestic abuse, including, of course, coercion. Let me just read briefly, if I may, from what the plan, which is, as I say, being launched this morning, says. Domestic violence and abuse blights the lives of those affected, whether they suffer the violence directly or are children growing up in homes where such violence is present. Research and experience of those working in this area indicate a significant level of underreporting. I am determined, working with the Chief Constable and other partners, to 1. Increase the level of confidence among survivors that by reporting such incidents, they will receive the help and support they need. 2. Build upon and strengthen the already impressive existing arrangements. 3. Explore new opportunities in the area. 4. Together with partners, to continue supporting local specialist providers to deliver quality and timely services to domestic violence and abuse survivors, encompassing those experienced honour-based violence and at risk from female genital mutilation. That's what the police and crime plan that goes, as it were, from today for the next 4 years will say. Sexual violence and domestic abuse is the most urgent, pervasive and significant protection issue facing women today, which is why it's a priority in the plan. But it is, and you all know this so well, a problem which remains largely hidden, and that's something we have to change. Encouraging vulnerable survivors to break the silence will only happen when they trust the professionals, whoever they may be, and services, whatever they may be, offering help, as well, of course, as the effectiveness of the judicial system. We all, I hope here, agree that new laws have added another string to the bow of police forces responding to violence and abuse, the legislation making coercive control in intimate or familial relationships a criminal offence is hugely significant. It does mean that the criminal justice system as a whole now has greater power to act decisively when it comes to controlling coercive or threatening behaviour. So now the enforcement tool is there, but where else should we be looking to seek solutions to eradicate this unacceptable behaviour? It's clear that we must consider new approaches in order to break the cycle of repeated incidents of domestic violence. I've decided to fund and implement the CARA project here in Leicestershire, which is aimed at doing precisely that, and I know that there's going to be a contribution today on CARA. It is a sad fact that insufficient evidence to pursue convictions often means individuals being released from custody with no further sanctions to deploy, and that misses a window of opportunity for individuals to reflect on their behaviour and the reason for their arrest. As you know, this scheme was piloted in Hampshire, and early indications show positive outcomes for those who have attended the workshops, and we're all looking forward to seeing how that works here in Leicestershire. Now, I've already argued that we have seen real changes in attitudes, both from the police and from the public, over the last number of years, into how sexual violence and domestic abuse, is both perceived and tackled. Reports of domestic violence are increasing. I think that's a good thing, because it actually means more people feel confident that police will respond sympathetically and effectively to their problem. But some things don't change fast enough, and we mustn't ignore the unhealthier picture that suggests that only a small minority of domestic abuse cases reported to police actually end in a conviction. And even more worryingly, only 25% of incidents are ever reported to police in the first place. All these are issues that you know about, but they're worth repeating. But more needs to be done, and something that's particularly important to me is in the whole area of legal aid. In that area, such essential support for those subject to abuse, the notorious, and I call it that with purpose, Legal Aid Sentencing and Punishment of Offenders Act, 2012, that's the LASPO Act, has made it enormously difficult for women seeking legal aid for divorce as a result of abuse. For example, the medical costs for court appearances alone can be prohibitive. Victims are expected to prove that they are victims to an extraordinary degree. That is totally unacceptable and is something that needs to change. It's my personal view that that Act of Parliament, passed in 2012, is among the worst pieces of legislation that there has been generally in the last 20 years. And it's absolutely, and it was such a close-run thing. I'm a member of the House of Lords, and we led for my party on this. And putting my political hat on for a moment, there was a tied vote on this issue of legal aid in domestic violence divorce cases. If that vote had just been won the other way, then the government, because it had been backwards and forwards, we've heard about in the papers ping pong, the government would have had to change their stance and modify it to some extent. So by a tied vote, it meant that we're stuck with this totally unsatisfactory system as far as those who've been victims of domestic abuse are concerned when they come to want to divorce in family courts. That needs to change, and change urgently. Anyway, let me conclude by just saying we're obviously all here today because we believe we want change. There's a huge amount of expertise and knowledge here, and all of us are passionate and committed to make that happen. It is impressive to see the amount of work collectively going on across Leicester and Leicestershire, and I really pray in aid the great work that the police are now doing in this particular field. The type of positive collaboration that there is between partners now does have benefits, and it's obviously why I give it my full support as Police and Crime Commissioner. So I look forward in the next 3 years to working with many of you here to continue the momentum of transformation so we can fight together to eradicate, if we can, at least to lessen domestic abuse and violence by a huge amount. And as Police and Crime Commissioner for this area, it will remain for me a major priority. Thank you very much.